Welcome everyone. We're excited to have you with us for today's webinar on the new line of Luma IP cameras. My name is Heidi Nilsson. I'm a marketing manager at Snap AV and I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. Before we get started, let's go through a few quick housekeeping items. First, we will be recording the presentation and we'll send you a copy by email within the next couple of business days. That email will also include a promo code for $50 off any future Snap AV purchase, so definitely be on the lookout for that email. And lastly, we are planning to have time at the end of the presentation for a Q&A session, so please send in those questions at any time during the webinar. You can do that using the question and answer feature in the webinar control panel. All right, now that that's out of the way, I'll turn it over to today's presenter, Alex Petrau.
Hello everyone, this is Alex Petrau. I'm very happy to join you and I'm very excited to introduce our Luma IP cameras. A little bit about myself. I'm the Director of Product for our surveillance products. I've been here for 4 years now and I just came back from our 5th CEDIA. It was really fantastic. I had a great opportunity to meet many of you in person. While I have been with the company for only 4 years, I have been in the electronics industry for 20 years. You can see my contact information below. If you have any other questions or follow-up feedback or discussion points, I love talking to you guys on the phone. Feel free to reach out to me by email and we can chat. But before we get started, let's talk a little bit about what we're going to discuss here today. So I want to start with some considerations on site design and how those considerations apply to how we designed the Luma IP camera line. And then we'll go into how we made improvements from our Wirepath IP cameras that we've been selling very successfully for the last couple of years to the new Luma brand. Then of course I'll introduce the new line and then I'll talk about some of the updates that we're coming with for the Luma NVR that are required for the Luma IP cameras, as well as some updates we made in our mobile app recently that really help enhance the line. We'll talk briefly about the transition from as we transition from Wirepath to Luma, and then I'll take some Q&A at the end. So let's get started. We got lots to go through. I have many slides here. We'll go relatively quickly through them, but I look forward to the conversation at the end. So let's talk about site design. I know a lot of you on the line have many, many years of experience on doing surveillance, probably much more than I have. But some of our customers struggle with how to design a good surveillance system and really how to have that conversation with the customer to make sure they get what they want. So really let's start with the very basics, right? Understanding what the customer wants. This is really key. Too often I hear stories of dealers who put up some cameras and those cameras just don't meet the expectation of the customer. So really before you get started with the site design, it's really important that you have a conversation with the customer to understand what they want to see in their surveillance solution, what level of detail do they want on any given camera, and then based on that, how do you best design a system around those types of things. So we'll go through some of that. As you decide where you want to put cameras, you really need to analyze that scene, account for the environment, account for lighting conditions, what will it look like during the day, what will it look like at night, how does landscape lighting affect things. So let's take a look at a given site. So here's a typical house, maybe not a typical house that you guys might do. You guys do some pretty fancy houses out there. But first you start to identify what are the entry points. You know, there's a couple of gates on this property. There's a front door, obviously, a back porch entrance, a garage entrance, and of course things like a driveway or the parking area in front of the garage. These are obvious points of interest, and then there's of course the front and backyard. So what does the customer want to see? Do they want a simple 4-camera system that will look at their front door, back door, and both the gates? Do they want to just see that a person is entering, or do they actually want to be able to tell facial details when they actually see that person entering? These are really important to understand on how many cameras you want and how you might adjust the camera for pointing and getting that level of detail. So let's talk about a couple examples. So if you look at the parking area of the in front of the garage, here you might want to just see who's there and who's approaching the garage door. So when you're looking at a camera like this, you want to make sure you're positioning it to see everything that you want to see, but also you get enough coverage but also the right level of detail. So in this case, the red, yellow, and green mark areas of detection, recognition, and identification. So in areas of detection, you'll detect that there's something there. In the areas of recognition, you'll recognize what kind of object it is, whether it's a person or male or female, that kind of thing. And then the red, which is very small, is where you'll get actual detail of who that person is with real facial features. It's really important that both you and your customer recognize that just because you have a camera pointing in an area doesn't mean you can tell all the facial details. It really depends on how close that subject is to the camera. So in this case, it makes sense to have a really nice wide-angle view so you can see everything that's in that garage or that driveway landing and parking area. And you'll obviously get much more detail than you would, say, looking at the area towards the neighbor's house. Let's take a look at another camera that we might add. Say we want a camera that's looking at the driveway. Here you want a more focused view where you're zoomed in down the driveway. You can see that the areas of identification, recognition, and detection are much further away from the camera because you're zoomed in, and that will allow you to get much more greater level of detail as cars enter and exit the driveway. So here's just some thoughts on the things you need to think about when trying to decide how many cameras you want, where you place the cameras, and how much detail you have depending on the level of zoom. And by the time you're done, you end up with something like this where you understand where all the cameras are, what level of zoom you're capturing, and you'll be able to show this to your customer and be able to provide them with appropriate levels of expectations of what they expect to see from their property. Again, some customers might just want 4 cameras to look at their doors and their driveway. Others want the peace of mind to be able to see their entire property, in which case obviously you'll want to make sure you get larger coverage around their property. So just thought I'd start with that to give you some thoughts around site design. And a lot of these notions really drove into how we designed the Luma surveillance line. So let's talk a little bit about how we built this line, how we transitioned from the Wirepath IP camera line to the new Luma IP camera line. So we started with the things that were really nice with the Wirepath IP cameras. Very simple lineup of kind of good, better, best with the 3, 5, and 700 series. We had great control system support, and most recently we enabled them for overseas. So of course we wanted to bring that over into the new Luma line. But on top of that, we wanted to greatly improve performance. The Wirepath IP cameras were using an older technology, so of course we wanted to increase the resolution. We also wanted to improve our motion detection capability. We always want to make the cameras easier to install. But one of the things that we worked very hard on, and it kind of goes unsaid most of the time, but we wanted to improve our quality. We in fact doubled our surge protection and tripled our ESD protection with our Luma line, which really makes the cameras much more sturdier, able to withstand weather events, and last much longer in the field to minimize the times you might need to roll a truck. So on control system compatibility, of course, we're going to have control system streaming drivers for our IP cameras for all the control systems. All of these systems will be available at launch or shortly after launch. Missing from this list is RTI. We'll also have RTI drivers. Those are in progress as well. So have no doubt we'll have drivers for all our Luma IP cameras. In addition, all of our IP cameras will be overseas enabled right from launch. We highly encourage you to load all of your cameras when you install them in a system to add them to your overseas account. This makes it easy to track real-time notifications from cameras, perform remote updates very easily. We're going to be adding more features to these cameras over time, and having that remote firmware update capability makes things very easy. When you are adding the cameras to your overseas account, it's very easy to add them in bulk. So for instance, if you're adding a Luma NVR, really the simplest way to go is to add the NVR manually to your overseas account for that location, and then there should be a plus button where if you hit that button, it will identify the 7, 10, 20 cameras you might have on that site. It'll quickly identify them and add them in bulk. It really makes things a lot easier. There are other simple settings that you can adjust on the oversee interface, things like time settings, if you're in a different time zone than than the Eastern time zone by default. Now, one thing we won't have at launch with the Luma IP cameras is the ability to get a snapshot through the oversee interface. That's something we'll be bringing on as a future update. So in terms of resolution, we wanted to move to high resolution. And so our top end of our line is moving from 2 megapixel to 4 megapixel. And what does that mean? Well, it certainly makes for a very nice looking picture, but really it's all about getting greater level of detail when you want to digitally zoom in on a particular part of the object. So here's a scene where you have a woman getting into a car, and you can see if you go to zoom in, the difference between what you'll get in terms of level of detail between, say, a 4 megapixel IP camera and a 2 megapixel IP camera. And this is where the person is pretty close to the camera, and you can see the level of detail difference. So really a 4 megapixel image is really about getting a greater level of detail when you want to digitally zoom in to see more detail. Now, one of the things we worked on with the Luma IP cameras is previously with our wirepath, we had a relatively simple way of detecting basic motion detection. It was based around just changing light in one of 3 boxes, and you had the ability to change the level of sensitivity on that. Well, with Luma, we've added 3 different types of motion detection. First is we have improved our basic motion detection. So basic motion detection is set up in the NVR, and instead of having 3 boxes, as you see on the picture on the left, now you have a grid that you can set up. So it's much easier to create a very oddly shaped object for looking for motion area. But at the end of the day, it's still basic motion where it's detecting changes in the light pattern. In addition to basic motion detection, you can also set up advanced motion detection, and these settings are set up in the camera itself. Advanced motion detection allows you to set up to 8 boxes. Now again, we're back to boxes unfortunately, but it gives you a greater level of flexibility in terms of being able to set up different sensitivities with each box between day and night. This can be important on some scenes where the difference in lighting conditions is much different between the day and night. So this allows you to really tune in the level of motion area, and obviously the goal with all of this is to try to reduce the number of false positives, so you don't get a ton of events when you should only get a ton of noisy events that you don't care about, and making you have to search through all those to find the one event you want to really look at. However, we have, on top of both basic and advanced motion detection, we now also have the ability to set up what we call smart motion. This is really basic analytics that are built into these cameras to give you even more capability than you've ever had before. So we have 2 new features. We have area intrusion boxes and we have line crossing. So on each camera you can set up to 1 intrusion box and 1 line crossing that will trigger recordings on the NVR when an event happens. This can be done on top of your basic or advanced motion. So let me explain a little bit of what those are. So area intrusion is where you draw a box on part of the screen. The difference between this box and a regular motion box is that it'll trigger when something enters or exits the box. It will not trigger if there is motion inside the box. So for instance, here we drew a box around a pool. Why is that interesting? Well, typically if you had a motion area on a pool, the shimmering light will cause tons of motion events because of the motion of the light and the sun moving across the sky along the water. If you draw an area intrusion box, well, that shimmering light actually will not cause any events if it's set up properly. It will only cause an event if somebody enters or exits the pool. So that's a really good use case. Another example might be putting a box around the landing of the front steps of your door. If somebody drops off a package, you want to be notified of that, or somebody removes that package. The line crossing is also very useful. So the line crossing is where you can draw a line on the screen. Here we have a driveway where we just simply drew a line on the front of the driveway. And you can set up that line crossing so that it'll trigger if somebody crosses the line in one direction or in the other direction or in both directions. So you can make it unidirectional or bidirectional. So these two types of smart motion events give you even a greater flexibility for being able to set up the ability to trigger on events without relying on the great many of false positives that can be generated from kind of more basic or advanced motion detection. So that's really exciting, and these are available. This type of smart, advanced, and smart motion events are all available on all models of our Luma cameras. I talked briefly about how we improved our quality. Well, we did this because we've now pretty much built a world-class quality lab downstairs. If any of you have ever had the opportunity to come visit us, you're all welcome to come by, and we'd show you this great lab that we've built. I know that we've had a couple quality issues in our power and amps recently, but those were for products that were built years ago. We've learned lots of lessons from those. We now have the ability to do ESD and surge to capabilities that the vast majority of products that are delivered and purchased in the United States cannot meet the standards of. We have really very, very high standards now when it comes to ESD and surge, because we've seen how essentially the United States is the lightning capital of the world, and we just get a lot of surge problems from a great many of our products. And with our cameras being on the walls outside of all these homes, they're really on the front lines of getting hit by either a direct or indirect surge events. So let's go straight into the new line, right? So we followed our similar series where we have our 3, 5, and 700 series. So let me introduce each of the series and kind of point out some of the really key differences. So first, with the 700 series Luma cameras, we have a dome and a bullet, just like we had with Wirepath. Gray and white options for the bullet, and black and white options for the dome. The bullet is exactly the same housing as our Luma analog lines. So if you've had experience with our Luma analog cameras, you'll understand that housing. The IP cameras relative to the analog domes are actually a little bit smaller. So they're actually a little bit narrower diameter. However, the resolution's been doubled. We went from Wirepath 2 megapixel camera to now a 4 megapixel Luma camera. The 700 series is varifocal, just like Wirepath, but now it's a motorized varifocal display or lens. What does that mean? Well, that means when you're installing the camera, you just point it in the right direction, make sure it's looking at the scene you want to see, and now you can get down off the camera, off the ladder, safely to the ground, and you can adjust the zoom and focus from your PC or Mac, and really dial in both the kind of the focal length of the camera, as well as really dial in that focus. So you can really get a perfect image while you're on the safety on the ground when you're looking at a full resolution, rather than trying to tune it in with a little tester. The other thing that we've done is we've increased the IR range of our 700 series to 90 feet. We did this to kind of get the ability to really zoom in and get a greater level of detail on objects, and also be able to see further. This is really an important feature because we really wanted to give the ability to see much further than we've had in the past, and really zoom in on things that are further away. Now, what this also means is that when the camera is zoomed all the way out, you might get a bit of a hot spot in the middle, because these cameras are not really built to be not zoomed in. I mean, we built a great 4 megapixel camera that can zoom in with a nice motorized zoom and focus. We expect people to zoom that in. As you'll see in the Set 500 series, it's really the right alternative if you don't plan on zooming in. The 700 series also includes low temperature operation down to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit, just like our 700 series. It's been built into our baseline 700 series. And then, as you can see, all the other features that are part of the Luma cameras that were not part of the Wirepath cameras. But really the key features around this camera, the motorized zoom and focus, 4 megapixel display, and really the use case being you want to zoom in for viewing long range, or kind of zoom in to get more detail. And here's an example where you're looking at a gate. I could just have the camera be looking at the whole scene, but really, what do I want to do? I want to see people coming in the gate. So here, you can zoom it right in, and when somebody walks in that gate, you can really get the facial features that you would otherwise not do so well in if you were seeing the whole scene. This camera is really meant to be zoomed in. The 500 series, by contrast, is also 4 megapixel. It's really a great big boost from our Wirepath cameras, and it's a fixed wide-angle lens. So this is really the camera that you want to use when you want to check out kind of the whole backyard, a large area, without having to zoom it in. It's already dialed in. The minimum temperature is -20, so that's still an improvement from Wirepath, and all of the smart motion and advanced motion features that you had with your 700 series are all there with the 500 series. The only difference here being the motorized zoom and focus and a little bit of IR range, because the IR range is shorter because it's a wider IR because it's meant to see the whole scene just like the camera. So this is really the great camera to buy when you want to look at the whole backyard. And then, of course, you have the Luma 300 series. The 300 series are great cameras. They're now 2 megapixel cameras. So full HD quality. They're low profile, really tiny bullet, really small dome. If you had an experience with our Wirepath 300 domes, they were indoor only, and they also only had a 2-axis gimbal. These have been both improved with the Luma, so all the cameras are outdoor rated. And also it has a 3-axis gimbal, so you can mount that on a wall and see everything well aligned. These 300 cameras were really designed to be up close and personal. They are meant to be installed close to the scene, so the IR range is not very long. But since it's close to the scene, it's also very low profile and kind of inconspicuous. You barely see you can barely tell that the camera is there. And the fact that it's only 2 megapixel is actually not that big a deal when the camera is close to the scene, because the pixel area coverage of each pixel is similar if the camera is closer to the scene as the higher resolution 4 megapixel camera. So really, really nice camera. So you can see here in this picture how small it is. We have this one kind of being installed in a doorway, and you can just see people coming up the doorway very, very well. Great little inconspicuous camera. So here's what the entire kind of lineup looks like overall. The biggest differences with this lineup, on the 500 series, we've added a turret model in addition to the existing dome and bullet. I'd love to hear feedback from you guys on the turret, and in the future I'd add more turrets if you guys want to hear that feedback. The resolution's been doubled or more across the board, and we've added, of course, that motorized varifocal to make things really easy to install when you're up on the ladder. Everything marked in green really marks major improvements over the Wirepath line. The one thing I do want to note is the Luma Cube camera, which will be a wireless camera, wireless or PoE camera. That one won't launch until Q1. That one's a little bit further behind, but the rest of the lineup is expected to launch hopefully by the end of this month. A little comment on the accessories. So we have accessories for the Luma IP cameras to service various applications, including a pole mount, a pendant mount for kind of open ceiling applications, and of course if you're on a sort of masonry housing, we have an extension mount, a junction box, and of course the arm mount that we had before. So we can meet any of the applications you might have. Couple caveats I want to make sure that people understand with the Luma IP cameras and limitations. As I mentioned before, overseas snapshots will not be supported at launch. This is something we couldn't get done in time, unfortunately, but we will be adding that capability in the future. Also, Luma IP cameras are incompatible with Wirepath NVRs. As you know, we may know we've discontinued our Wirepath NVR line in August of last year. The Luma IP cameras will not work with Wirepath NVRs. We are actually working on a firmware update for our Wirepath NVR so that they will support Luma IP cameras, but at launch we will not be able to support Luma IP cameras on the old Wirepath NVRs. Luma IP cameras are incompatible with Wirepath mounts. So we have a separate Luma mount and accessories line compared to WirePath. They're incompatible between the two. I just wanted to point that out. Also, some of the Luma mounts are only applicable for IP or analog. So, for instance, since the dome mount, the dome camera is a little smaller diameter, that affects a couple of the mounts, like the angle mount and the cap that's used with the arm mount. So those are IP specific versions of the Luma accessories. But you'll be able to see that in the description of the accessories. It'll either say specifically analog or IP, or if it's generic, like the arm mount can be used for either, then it won't say anything at all. So just be careful when you're buying the accessories not to mix and match if it's not compatible. So moving on quickly, I'd like to talk about NVR firmware update that we're working on as well. So with the Luma IP camera launch, we had to make some changes to the Luma NVR to be able to support it. So along with the Luma IP cameras, we'll be launching in late October a new NVR firmware update. So the first thing we're doing with this update is, of course, adding support for the new Luma IP cameras. We're also increasing the ability for the NVR to support 4 megapixel cameras. This also is required for the Luma IP camera launch. However, we're also adding some other new features, and the big one that I'm able to announce today is the ability to do simultaneous continuous and event recording at the same time. This is something that all of you have been asking for quite some time. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. We also added some new control system commands, which are very interesting. And we have a fix for email notifications. As some of you may know, we had a bug in our TLS support for email. So many of the major email service providers have moved away from SSL and are now requiring TLS support. This firmware update will allow you to once again support all email service providers requiring TLS. And then we have lots of other miscellaneous improvements that I can't talk about today. We literally had hundreds of things that we worked on this build. So just to give you a little flavor for the recording changes. So when you set the NVR to record continuous, what it's actually going to be doing is it'll record all the time, but when it sees a motion event, or in the case of a smart motion event, a VCA event, then it'll show up as a yellow mark within your timeline. So the blue is where it's just recording as it normally would record, but now you're able to see where those events happened, both visually and when you press the search button, you'll be able to search on those events. So this is something that a lot of you have been asking for quite some time, and we're finally able to deliver here with this new firmware update. These functions on being able to see the timeline both visually and through the search are available on the web interface, the MI interface, as well as on the mobile app. I mentioned control system improvements. We've done a couple things that are very interesting. So first of all, many of you know that we essentially port forward the web interface of the cameras through the NVR when the cameras are on the switch that's on the NVR. Those are being routed through today. But now we're also routing the RTSP port as well through the NVR. This is really exciting because now you can actually get the HD TVI stream, the RTSP H.264 stream from the camera through the NVR directly to your control system. So this is very exciting. I don't think anyone else does this. I think we're the first to do this. So it's really part of how we really try to create the best interfaces to control systems. The other interesting thing that we've done to the NVR is we've added additional commands to the control system interface. We have now the ability to enable and disable recordings for each camera on the NVR. We also have the ability to enable and disable email notifications on each camera through the NVR. What is this, why is this interesting? Well, this is very interesting because a lot of end users, end customers don't want cameras inside the home for obvious privacy reasons. Well, this will allow you to control the ability to see recordings and email notifications through the control system. So the control system typically might know when the homeowner is home or away, because you might put the house into a home or away mode, or even vacation mode or whatever. Well, when the home is in home mode, that means they want privacy. So turn off the recordings, turn off email notifications for only the cameras inside the home. You can keep the cameras outside the home still active. Obviously when they leave and go into away mode, of course you can turn the recordings back on, turn the email notifications back on, and you can get recordings for the cameras inside the home. Okay. When they have service people come to the home, you might want to turn the recordings back on, but keep the notifications off. So really this gives you a high degree of flexibility, much higher degree of flexibility than you had before, to be able to control when indoor cameras are active. This we think will help you sell more cameras inside the home and give you more capability and more ways to show off the customization of your smart homes that you're programming into your customers. A couple other little things that we added. We changed the icons of the HDMI interface to make them more bold. That way when the homeowner is using their remote control to control the interface through the TV, they'll be able to more easily see where they're navigating when they're standing away from the TV. And then we added a few other commands on the IR side for greater grid control through the local interface. So we're constantly trying to make improvements, and we've done a few control system improvements here that we think will help. So in addition to the update to the NVR, we recently actually launched an update to the mobile app that's already live right now. The big news here, and the really exciting news here, is we finally added native iPad support. So what we actually did to the Luma mobile app is we have one app that now natively will scale to the resolution of the device that it's playing on iOS. So whether it's a phone, an old iPhone 4 or 5 or 6 or the new pluses, or an iPad mini or an iPad Pro, it will natively scale to the resolution of that device. So it's one app that will scale directly. In addition to the native iPad support, we can now play back up to 4 cameras simultaneously, so you can play back just one camera or up to 4. Now if you have a 16 camera device, you'll have to select which 4 you want to play back, but you can now play back more than one at a time. We've also made it much more convenient to access the playback. So previously you'd have to hit the home button to start a playback. We've added a new icon. Hopefully you can see my mouse. We've added a new icon in the lower left-hand side where you can select the camera, hit that button, and now let's start playing back that camera. You just enter in the time period that you want. And if you start playing back, you'll see on the right side, you can see an example where I'm doing continuous record and events showing on the timeline at the same time. Now if I want to go back to live mode, I just hit that same icon again to go back to live. So in addition to kind of the native iPad support, 4 cameras simultaneous playback, and easier access to playback, generally you'll see an improved overall performance of this app over previous version of the app in general. So a nice little update to the mobile app. So one thing I want to make sure that everyone knows is we do have a demo system on our website that allows you to view some cameras in our NVR interface that we have set up around our office here. I know I've talked to a lot of dealers who didn't know we had this, so I wanted to make sure everyone knew that we had this capability. So here's a link to the demo landing page on our website. If you click this link, it goes to this page here. Here we show a video of kind of our GUI interface on a Mac in this case, and a demo of our demo video of our mobile app. In addition to that, you can go ahead and log into a live demo. Here's some links to the live demo if you were to do that through a browser, and what to do, and the username and password. The username and password is just user1234 to get on there. And then also how to set up the mobile app so that you can have your mobile app actually point to our demo system at our place. Just so you have an idea of what our demo system is set up as, this will work for both the DVR and NVR. We have 8 4-channel DVRs and NVRs set up with various cameras throughout our offices, and when you log into one of these URLs, there's kind of a round-robin scheme. You'll automatically log into one of those 8. So you may see a different set of cameras if you log on at different times, but be sure to know that you'll be able to view our cameras set up as they are today. Now I'll go ahead and quickly log into our demo right now so you can see what you'll see. Now we're actually updating this demo as we speak with Luma IP cameras. One of the things that a number of you have asked for quite some time is the ability to have different series of cameras to be able to show off the quality of different cameras on the screen on the demo. So we've done that finally. So I'm going to go ahead and log in and let's see what we see. So right now I'm logging into our demo. I don't know which cameras I'll see because it's a round-robin scheme. So here you have it. We have 4 of our cameras. Looks like we have a 300 series bullet looking at the parking lot over here, a couple 500 series cameras on the left, and a 700 series dome camera on the upper right. So let's go ahead and zoom in on the 700 series, and as you can see, it's a very nice picture quality 4 megapixel camera, which is actually a higher resolution than what this display is able to see. But because of that higher resolution, now I can go in and zoom in on something and get a much greater level of detail when I go to digitally zoom as a result of that higher resolution. So I highly encourage you to log into our demo if you haven't before. You're welcome to have your customers take a look at these and play around with the interface just so that they can see what they would see in their system if you were to install a Luma surveillance solution into their homes. We also have a lot of dealers who set up demo systems in their own homes, and feel free to contact us and we'll certainly give you a great deal to put a Luma system in your homes to help demonstrate these products to your customers. So I just wanted to finish off to just give you a few words about how we'll be transitioning over the next few weeks from our Wirepath IP cameras to our Luma IP cameras. So as I mentioned before, we're expecting to launch the Luma IP cameras in late October. We're in the final stages of our beta testing period right now. We'll be discontinuing our Wirepath IP cameras about a month later. Now we won't be selling all of our Wirepath cameras because we'll be maintaining a stock of Wirepath IP cameras for warranty replacement for some time. We'll continue to honor the warranty of our Wirepath cameras. We probably don't have a 3-year supply to cover the 3-year warranty of Wirepath cameras, so at some point we'll run out of Wirepath cameras, in which case you get lucky and we'll send you a Luma. And as I mentioned before, the Luma Cube, which is the final SKU for the Luma IP line, will launch in early 2017. So that's the last of my slides, and I'm hoping we have some interesting questions to talk through.
All right, thanks, Alex. We do have a ton of questions, and just as a reminder, you guys can still submit questions using the question and answer feature in the webinar control panel. All right, now let's get to our first question. Are you going to develop an app for Apple TV?
That's a great question. It's something I'm very interested in doing. It's not something we started working on right now, but it is something I'm definitely considering for our roadmap, but we haven't begun that part of things yet. But I'd be excited to do such a thing, and I'm kind of waiting to see how the Apple TV launches this year to see if there's a lot of new momentum around the new product. So nothing in the works right now, but I'm as interested as you are in seeing if that's something a lot of our dealers are requesting.
Okay, next question. Will iOS app motion notifications be coming to the Luma app? That's the #1 request that this dealer gets from their clients.
We don't have a plan right now to get notifications through the app just yet. Certainly you can get notifications through email and text. You can do an email to text if you'd like. We are working on getting email notifications through the Oversee app and eventually into Oversee Home. If you're receiving the request for notifications from your customers, then I'd love to hear that, because the more we get that feedback, the more likely we will be to act on it. I just want to point out that we like to listen to our customers quite a bit. So anytime you call in and talk to any of our customer-facing team, whether it be a salesperson, a customer support person, or a tech support people, feel free to give this kind of feedback to them. When you do, it results in an email coming to me saying, hey, this dealer would like to see this X, Y, and Z feature on these products. The more of those requests I get, the more likely I am to act on it. And that's the case with our surveillance line, and it's the case with all of our lines. So that's great feedback. I will look at seeing if we can start pushing notifications to the app, and the more feedback we get from you guys, the better when it comes to these kind of feature requests.
Okay, on a related note, someone is wondering if snapav.com has a site layout tool like the one that you showed earlier in the webinar.
Great question. I kind of figured someone would ask me about that. We do not have such a tool today. It's something that I'd like to build, and the more requests I get from you guys about having such a site layout tool, the more likely I'll be able to get our marketing folks to build such a thing. We're also thinking about, so it is something we're actively thinking about, is creating that site layout tool, but also we're actually thinking about potentially even offering a service where we can help you design and create a site layout given a layout of the property. That particular layout that I pulled there was just off of Google Maps, where I just zoomed in on Google Maps to get the property and then build accordingly. So it's not a tool that we have today. It is a tool that I'm actively looking at, but we're also interested in potentially having a service site design. I'd love to get feedback on that. So if you want to feed that back through the system, the more feedback like that we get, the quicker we'll be able to get that up and running. But thanks for the feedback. Unfortunately, the answer is no today, but hopefully yes by next year.
Okay, great. Question on the bulk setup. Do the cameras need to be plugged into the NVR or DVR, or would Oversee find those cameras outside of the NVR?
Good question. So the way bulk setup works is it'll find any devices that are plugged into the same network as a device you've already added to that account for that location. So it could be any device. So all you have to do is set up a single device first, the manual way, whether it be an NVR, a WAP box, Arachnus router, switch. You just set up one device, and as soon as you set up that one device, Oversee will then check all other Oversee devices connected on that same network, whether it's plugged into the back of the NVR, whether it's plugged into a switch on that same network. What it's looking for is all the devices with the same public IP address, and once you hit that plus button, it'll basically give you a list, and it'll say, oh, you have 12 surveillance products and 6 networking products and 1 power product available to be added. Do you want to add them? And you just click on it, and then you'll go through a bulk setup process where you can go through and name each one. So it makes it really easy to set up a bunch of our Oversee products on a single site, because you just add the one in that manual way, and then we kind of trust you to add all the rest.
All right, thanks, Alex. Question about the new line and box triggering motion detection. Will those features be coming to the Luma DVRs with a future firmware update?
Very good question. Unfortunately, the answer is no. The DVR doesn't have enough horsepower to do that level of analytics right now. It might be something that we might add to a future version of the DVR, but it's not something we can do on the DVR today with the amount of processing and memory we have in the DVR today. Keep in mind that This is easier to do on the camera because it's only processing one image at a time, whereas the DVR is having to process 4, 8, or 16 images at the same time. So the level of processing required is much, much higher.
Okay, question on control systems. Are there plans to write more advanced drivers for Control 4? This dealer would love the ability to have motion feedback triggers to trigger an event in Control 4 systems and the ability to send snapshots.
So we will have the ability to get motion triggers with the current driver. Unfortunately, the box intrusion and the line trigger, that wasn't able to be done for this driver and this particular launch. But the motion triggers, you will be able to, whether it's a basic or advanced motion trigger, will be able to trigger an event on Control 4. I don't know, we don't have the ability to send a snapshot through Control 4. I'd like to understand that a little bit more. I probably can't get too detailed into the technicals of the snapshot part of it. So please, if you could email me, let's start a conversation about that because I'd like to understand in more detail what you're asking for on the snapshot side of things. So you have my email, alex.petreo@snapav.com. Please contact me. I'd like to talk more detail there.
All right, here's a great question about the 700 series. Is the zoom feature designed for installation purposes only, or can the end client zoom in and out also?
Well, I'm very happy you asked that question because I forgot to mention it when I was introducing the 700 series. Yeah, the zoom for that camera is only meant for installation only. We don't want your customers doing that. The motors in there are only made to be moving in and out in a very limited number of times. It's not like a PTZ, which is meant for high frequency or a high number of times moving in and out. So installation only feature, yes.
Okay, so how about PTZ IP cameras? Any plans for those?
Yes, I expected someone would ask that question. So PTZ IP cameras are actually the next project up on the queue. I was hoping to launch these cameras back in like May, June, and I would be working on IP cameras right now, but unfortunately it was a little bit delayed, more delayed than I was hoping. IP camera. So the next project is 2 IP cameras, one with a 20x zoom and one with a smaller 4x zoom. Also working on an HD TVI PTZ as well, and a 6 megapixel fisheye IP camera. So those are the next. That's the next project we're actively working on right now. We expect to launch those hopefully by mid next year or sooner. Great question.
Okay, so cloud recording, what are your thoughts on that? Do we have any plans to pursue that in the future?
Very good question. So we don't, we haven't immediately started that project, but it is actually on my roadmap. Let's talk a little bit about cloud recording. So cloud recording is very, very interesting. Obviously, it's pretty big on some of the more DIY type cameras out there. One of the basic problems with cloud recording, though, is that most people's upstream bandwidth is just not high enough to record at the same level of quality that people have come to expect in the cameras, just because there's just not enough bandwidth, right? So one of these 4 megapixel IP cameras, even if it's variable speed, can take up to 6,500 megabits per second at a very good quality. That's higher than most people's up bandwidth at all, right? A lot of people have 3 or 5 megabit upstreams. So if you have multiple cameras at these high resolutions, it's very difficult to do a pure cloud recording. You're going to have to sacrifice in terms of how often you're recording, the resolution at which you're recording, the quality at which you're recording, the frame rate at which you're recording. You're going to have to sacrifice one of those things, or more likely all of those things, when recording to the cloud. Now, with that said, I'm actually a big proponent of doing backups to the cloud. So you can have that really high fidelity recording locally while backing up to the cloud as a redundancy. So what we're working on is actually exactly that, the ability to either record to the cloud, but actually more importantly, back up to the cloud, assuming local storage, again, to create more peace of mind for the end user that you'll be capturing the events that need to be captured when they need to be captured. So um, while we're beginning stages of planning cloud recording, more importantly, we're really at the beginning stages of planning cloud backup. Now, hopefully in a couple of years we'll be living in a world where everybody has Google Fiber with a gigabit downstream and upstream, and we can record to the cloud all we want. But until we get to that point, we do need to be mindful that cloud-only recording really is built for only DIY solutions with that low resolution, low quality to the cloud. Great question, though.
All right, here's an interesting question about the future of surveillance. Do you see IP cameras and NVRs completely replacing HD TVI cameras and DVRs, or will the larger price difference between these systems keep the analog around forever?
Well, it's great, another great question. So when it comes to surveillance, the market is moving to IP. As a whole, the market is moving to IP. Now, what is the market? The market is primarily large commercial jobs. And if you think about what IP is great at, regardless, let's set aside the fact that IP traditionally was high res and analog was low res. That's gone away with HDTVI. Commercial jobs, large-scale commercial jobs, are all about scalability. And at the end of the day, IP cameras are very scalable because they're on the network, and doesn't matter how far away the camera is from the recording location, you have a very scalable system when it comes to IP. Now, that said, scalability is not really that important for most of the applications in the CDS space. I mean, if you're looking at a home, you're not looking for scale, you're looking for simplicity. Things like simplicity, cost is important. You might have retro, problems with retro homes that have wiring that incompatible with IP. So I take the viewpoint that I think analog in our market will be around for quite some time. So we're going to continue to support analog just like we're supporting IP going forward. What we've done with the Luma line is to create one platform that has both that supports both analog and IP. So if you install an analog system in one house and an IP system in another house, it all acts the same, looks the same. Now, long term, you'll see differences between analog and IP. I think IP will always be a higher resolution than analog, but at the same time, analog resolutions are growing up. We recently introduced 720p and 1080p with analog. Well, guess what? We're already looking at 3, 5 megapixel cameras on the analog side. So analog will continue to be a very viable option in our space, because of the fact that scalability is not really required, and analog will always be cheaper than IP. Now, that said, IP has other benefits that analog does not have. We saw today here with Luma IP cameras that it's much easier to do intelligent things like analytics in IP world because of the distributed processing nature of the cameras versus a DVR. There are other factors such as since you're creating a digital system, you're more likely to have higher resolution on the IP side sooner than the analog, because you don't have to do that, the analog multiplexing through the line and having to deal with a signal-to-noise ratio of sending a high-resolution image across a long coax cable. So there are challenges to high-resolution analog, but at the end of the day, you don't have a network card in every camera, therefore it's always going to be cheaper. That's just the nature of the beast. So like I said, I think analog will stick around in this market for quite some time. It'll always be cheaper and lower res, but oftentimes that's very much okay for our market, especially now that we have HD on the analog side.
All right, thanks, Alex. Here's a question about the SD card support. Does this mean that you can record on the SD card without the need for an NVR, for example, with a single camera scenario?
Yes, you can. If you load an SD card, you can record to the SD card. You can only record events to the SD card, and the interface to viewing those recordings is not quite as good as it is through an NVR, but absolutely can record to an SD card with these cameras. Our 700 series has an SD card in it with it can support up to 128 gigabit SD card, gigabyte SD card.
All right, great. So how about a 360-degree camera? Is that something that's on the roadmap?
Yes, I think I mentioned it. So we're in the same project that we're working on the IP, also working on a 360-degree fisheye. It's a 6-megapixel fisheye, outdoor rated, that we're working on right now. It'll either be a 3-in-1 or a 2-in-1, meaning it'll have the main warped image that will stream to the NVR. It'll also allow you to have either 2 or 3 non-warped images that will go to the NVR to be recorded as well. When you want to view the de-warped image, you can either view that through the app or view the recorded version through a special player that will allow you to basically view a recorded video like a PTZ and explore that location. So it's very, very cool. That's something we're working on right now as well.
All right, and we're just about out of time, so let's take one last question. We've had several people ask about compatibility between old Wirepath cameras and new Luma NVRs and DVRs. Can you just run through that for everyone?
Sure. So obviously we've been selling Wirepath IP cameras with the Luma NVR for over a year now, and so the compatibility of the Wirepath cameras with the Luma NVRs is still very, very good. You might be referring to, I'm guessing you're referring to an issue about the motion record when it came to Control 4. If that is what you're talking about, we currently have that kind of workaround for Control 4 where we have the Control 4 logging into the camera using a different username and password to deal with that motion issue. We're actually working on a firmware update for that Wirepath IP camera, so you don't have to implement that workaround to deal with those motion record issues. So if that's what you were talking about, the answer is that we're working on that firmware. That should be available before the end of the year. Other than that, our Wirepath IP cameras work great with the Luma recorder. They're plug and play, and they've been working great for the last year.
All right, thanks, Alex. Well, that's all we have time for. Looks like we're ending right on time. As a reminder, look out for our follow-up email that will include a recording of today's session, as many of you have been asking. We'll also include a promo code for $50 off your next Snap purchase, and we'll be sure to include the link to the camera demo that Alex displayed during the presentation today. And as you exit the webinar, we would also ask that you take a minute to fill out our 3-question survey. Let us know what you thought about today's session and other topics that you would like us to cover in the future. So on behalf of Luma and Snap AV, thanks again for joining us today, and happy installing.